What's up, everyone? This is Landry here again with the Cheeseheadz Weekly Podcast. This is Tuesday again. It seems like it's been a long week. There's been a lot of stuff happening. With the franchise tag deadline ending today, ended at 4 p.m. It's March 7th. And lots of stuff is happening ahead of free agency coming up March 15th here. So it should be awesome. So let's just, we'll get to some news here, but I want to thank my supporters. That's been great, and thanks for the participation. And this week we even got a voice message, which I will share with you today and address that. But the show is available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts. As of now, those are the only three. And of course, if you really want to, you can listen to it on Anchor. And send in a voice message. I'd love to get more of those. They're a lot of fun. Send in a question or advice to me, or just anything related to football that you would like me to address. Maybe ideas for other episodes of the show. But as of now, the show is the time is filling up rather easily with a lot of stuff happening here. The combine ended over the weekend as well, and so we got a few things from that. So let's get into some news. There's been lots of cuts to clear some cap space, and some pretty notable ones. The Tennessee Titans parted ways with offensive tackle Taylor Lewin. He's been a Titan for a while, 31 years old, and he's been a Titan his whole career, if I'm not mistaken. Bobby Wagner, former linebacker of the Seahawks, then went to the Rams. The Rams just looking to clear some money because Bobby Wagner's still playing at a high level, and so teams will be looking to pick him up. Good veteran addition. Robert Woods was also cut by Tennessee. Defensive tackle Michael Brockers was cut by the Detroit Lions. He didn't. He kind of cost a lot of money and was not all that great for them, and so they decided to cut him. Linebacker Zach Cunningham. Guess who's cut him? That's right. It's the Tennessee Titans. So they are parting ways with him. Defensive end Al-Quadin Muhammad, Chicago, cut him. He was only there for one season. Kicker Randy Bullock, cut by the Tennessee Titans. Apparently they are a little bit short on cash at the moment. And then, of course, with the franchise tag deadline, we've had some moves happening today, a frenzy of them. We got the latest news for that. Saquon Barkley was tagged with the non-exclusive one. So teams are able to actually sign him, offer him money, and then sign him to an offer sheet, I believe it's called. And then the Giants have 5 days to match that money, or else they have to lose him and I believe they get some kind of compensation, but probably not enough. But the main advantage of that for the Giants is that um, they can they don't have to pay him as much money on the tag if they can't get a long-term deal done. That same tag was placed on Lamar Jackson, so he won't earn quite as much money on the tag if he plays on the tag. They're trying to get a long-term deal done with him. I do know they will. He can be signed um, onto an offer sheet or um, and negotiate with another team. If the Ravens do not match the amount of money, they will acquire 2 first-round draft picks. That still is not enough for Lamar Jackson, obviously. So the non-exclusive tag is any player can get, or any team that ends up letting a player go will get 2 first-round draft picks. So that's interesting. So you're not going to want to just sign anyone. And so that's why the non-exclusive franchise tag works well for most players. Um, so that's interesting. Just kind of learning a little bit more about that. Josh Jacobs also received the non-exclusive tag, as did Darren Payne, defensive tackle for the Washington Commanders, and Tony Pollard, Cowboys running back. Josh Jacobs had a monster year, which led to him getting the tag, and hopefully he will be signed to a long-term deal. That's what they're hoping. Orlando Brown of the Chiefs will not be tagged, and neither will Chauncey Gardner-Johnson of the Eagles or Matt Gay, kicker for the Rams, or Draymond Jones, Jonathan Jones, cornerback for Patriots, Draymond Jones, defensive end for the Broncos. Those will all not receive the tag, it has been reported. Some players that were candidates but did not, and Green Bay did not consider it necessary to put the tag on Keyshawn Nixon. There were some deals done. Daniel Jones signed a big deal, long-term deal with his team, the Giants, and so their goal was to keep Jones and Barkley, and that ended up happening. Daniel Jones came right down to the wire, but he agreed to a 4-year, $160 million deal. And so then they tagged Barkley. They decided, well, which contract should we work on first, Barkley or Jones? Well, the most important player out of those two is obviously Jones, to be able to secure your franchise quarterback. So that should be, I think that's a good move by them. Kudos to the Giants. I really like the way their team is trending and their organization. Got a good general manager, smart guy, and also Brian Daboll. You saw what happened there his first season with no wide receivers at all, and he made Jones into a good quarterback without wide receivers. They get some wide receivers in there. They do a few more things. They're going to be an amazing team, and that just tells you right there that Brian Daboll is the real deal. And if the Giants know anything, they need to know what's good for him. They gotta keep him. They gotta keep Daboll no matter what. And re-signing Jones was a good move. They did release Kenny Golladay. Or he's expected to be released at least. It's not official yet, but so they're looking to move on because the receiver's not much happening there. There's just not a whole lot there for them, and Golladay did not perform well at all. But good year for the Giants, and they're doing the right thing. Hopefully they can get a deal done with Barkley, and they'll really be set. And And a big move, two big moves in relation to the Packers and other teams as well. The Saints and Derek Carr have agreed to a 4-year, $150 million contract with $100 million guaranteed. This is going to be great. I think the Saints made a good move. They were interested in trading for Carr. Carr's like, no, I don't want to trade. I want to pick my team. He still decided to go with the Saints and get plenty of money. So that's big news for the Saints. And Derek Carr was kind of the fallback option for the Jets if they couldn't sign Rodgers. So now that might make them go harder after Rodgers. Another fallback option that they were open to, Geno Smith, quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, proved to be a capable, if not above average. He was above average. He was a top 10 quarterback last year with the Seahawks. Agreed to a new 3-year contract worth $105 million with the Seahawks. So he's going to stay there where he's had success, and hopefully he will continue to have that success. So we do have our first ever guest on the show. We're going to get right into that here shortly because it's going to be a long show either way because just having guests on the show. But there's been a flurry of Rodgers news, and so we got to cover that. First report that came out from Michael Silver of Bally Sports. He was talking about the high maintenance persona, low commitment leadership as the reasons for exhaustion. Packers are apparently exhausted of him. And he reported the Packers believed Rodgers checked out after he signed that record-breaking extension last season back in March. After he decided he was going to play, they signed him to that, and he wasn't at OTAs, didn't do off-season work, and went on to have not very good of a season, at least not for him. So he did say the Packers definitely will not be begging Rodgers to return. But if Rodgers decided he will actually go all in, they would be okay having him back. But I'm not totally sure he will be back. And we'll hear more of that later as I talk Rodgers with someone else here, with a guest on the show. But then after that, there was a report that from Trey Wingo, I believe of Pro Football Network, and he said that Rodgers and the Jets had conversations on Monday, and that Rodgers is open to playing in New York in 2023. So that's obviously assuming Rodgers is going to play. We still have not heard his decision yet. And then also the Packers did give permission to Rodgers to talk to the Jets, and then now the Jets are going to fly out to California to actually meet in person with Rodgers. So that if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does, because that's pretty big news for the Packers, for the Jets, for Aaron Rodgers, for Jordan Love. That's big stuff. And that tells you the Jets are really interested, very much interested in Rodgers. I like to listen to the Colin Cowherd podcast. I think maybe my favorite dark horse team is the Panthers. You can go listen to Colin Cowherd, look it up. But he laid out some reasons. The Panthers did inquire about a trade, I believe, on Thursday. And they definitely, it does kind of make some sense. Obviously, the Jets are still big favorites, especially after this news. But if there's a dark horse team, I believe it's the Carolina Panthers. But let's listen to the voice message here that came in from Alex Martin.
Want to start by saying I'm a fan of the show. Keep it up. When it comes to the battle between Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, I believe it should go to Aaron Rodgers. I would like to see him retire as a Packer, as I'm sure many Packers fans would. Now, I get it. You want something new, you want something different. Things just haven't been working out. But I believe Aaron Rodgers definitely has the experience under his belt. Now, what I think would be beneficial is signing some core receivers. There's some notable ones coming up here in the free agency market. You have Jarvis Landry, McCole Hardman. You have Juju Smith-Schuster and Jacoby Myers. Plenty of guys with a lot of experience under their belt. My question is, do you see any of these guys going to the Packers? And if not, why not?
So, I want to start by saying thank you for being a big fan of the show. I believe I've seen the most participation from you. So, biggest fan of the show so far. And first voice message here from Alex. So that's really cool. To answer your question, quite bluntly, no, I cannot see the Packers if they keep Aaron Rodgers signing any of those guys. I do agree with you, in that they should. They absolutely should. But the thing is, they have a major handicap, and that is Rodgers' contract. They signed him to that big contract, and then he kind of isn't as all in. Well, of course he isn't. He'd take less money if he was all in. If the Super Bowl was his main goal, he'd take less money. He should. If he really wants wide receivers, he's bashed the Packers about this before. You gotta, there's no money there for the Packers to sign some of these guys. Um, I would love to see some of these guys around Green Bay with Rodgers. That'd be great. These are good veteran guys. I think my favorite out of the ones you mentioned would be Jacoby Myers. I really like him. He's still young and he catches a lot of passes. You wouldn't be struggling with drops that some of the younger guys would be. But no, I can't see that happening because it just hasn't happened very much unless you can get one of those guys cheap, like kind of like what they did with Sammy Watkins. But we don't want a Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins didn't help nothing. We need something more than a Sammy Watkins, and I think unless Rodgers takes a pay cut, um, I can't see them signing other guys, and I think that's a big reason why they just want to move on so they can do more, as far as in the market for a wide receiver or for any other guys this offseason. Also, you said about how you think Rodgers should be the guy next season. Um, I don't consider that likely anymore. You'll hear some of that here in our conversation later. And also, I think um, I at one point did want Rodgers to retire as a Packer. I think it would still be great to have his whole career as a Packer, but it would prove more just his personal legacy if he was able to go win a Super Bowl with another team, and kind of like what Tom Brady did. And I just don't see it happening. I don't really want that anymore. If he were to retire right now, that would be okay. But honestly, I'd just rather see him traded, and we can get some compensation from that. It's a little bit more salary cap space, at least for right now, and then we can move on, go to another chapter, start a new era with Jordan Love. But let's get into our conversation here. Um, we have a guest coming on the show here, so we'll bring him on to talk some Rodgers here. So let's get right into that. Well, the moment has finally arrived here for Cheeseheadz Weekly. We've got our first guest on the show. It's my uncle Troy, big Packers fan and friend of the show. How long have you been a Packers fan?
Well, Landry, the first time I remember being a Packer fan was when I was probably 11 years old, is when I really started getting into football. So I know that's going to date me, but that puts me at about 1977 is when I started watching the Packers. And in those years, the Packers were not a very good football team. So to watch them lose week after week consistently, um, shows how you had to be loyal, right, to stick with them. And but boy, it sure paid off as the team progressed and got better and better, especially during the Don Majkowski Magic years, and then getting to see Brett Favre come in as a rookie and the Aaron Rodgers era. So there's been some good football lately. But for yourself, you've experienced a lot of good football. You haven't seen those down seasons as much as some other Packer fans, but you can't help it because of your age. But there's been some pretty lean years.
Yeah, so what is your most memorable game of the Packers?
That's easy for me. The most memorable game would have been September 24th, 2001. It would have been a Monday night football game against the Washington Redskins. The Packers won that game 37 to nothing. And normally you would say, well, that's not even a close game. Why was that your favorite game? Well, that was the first game after 9/11 happened. The NFL postponed, I believe, the first week's games, or they were thinking about it. Anyway, right after 9/11 happened, um, they held that Monday night football game. And I admit, going to the stadium, it was a little uneasy because it was like, what could something happen again to our country after the terror attacks in New York and the Pentagon? Uh, and what was interesting about that is just the patriotism that you saw in the stadium that night when they sang the national anthem. And then Chris Gizzy, who was a linebacker for the Packers, he only played there 2 seasons, but he was the first one out of the tunnel, number 57, and he was carrying the flag and running onto the field. And everybody in the stadium were handed out miniature flags upon entry into the stadium, and the whole entire crowd was chanting "USA, USA." And they would break out in song during the game of "God Bless America." So it was a very memorable night, and the football game almost was secondary to what we saw on the field that night. But I was Brett Favre had a fantastic game. He threw for 3 touchdowns that game, and uh, Amon Green had a great running game that game. So we just destroyed them. Jeff George was the quarterback of the Redskins. Um, and yeah, 37 to nothing was the final of that. That's by far the most memorable game I've been at.
So, we're here to talk some Rodgers and Love and just kind of the quarterback situation in Green Bay uh, going into next season and beyond, I guess. So right now it seems like Rodgers is coming off a down year. Packers seem to be very high on Love overall. Just uh, GM has mentioned it, Packers general manager, uh, and just the coaches, the players, everyone seems to think Love has taken a big jump. But at this point, we're still waiting on Rodgers' decision, and uh, Brian Gutekunst is kind of just um, trying to say all the right things. He says the next step for Love is to play, but they want to do right by Rodgers as well. So let's just jump right into it. What do you think the Packers should do about the situation there at quarterback, and who do you consider to be the best option for them going into this season and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a difficult question. It's one that everybody's trying to master and try to figure out, right? And I honestly don't think anybody knows the answer other than Aaron Rodgers, like what he wants to do and the Green Bay Packers. And when Aaron Rodgers talks about his inner circle and he only talks to his inner circle and everything else, the media comes out and says, don't believe it because it's not coming from my group. And that's there's probably some truth to it. You see all these different articles like, the Packers are tired of Rodgers' antics and they're ready to be done with them. I saw that report. Well, Was that said? I think it's just speculation. It makes for good clicks, on the internet. It makes good articles. But I think at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think really it's Brian Gutekunst. If you listen to him, he's the GM, right? What did he just say a few days ago when he was asked the question? And I thought his answer was really interesting. He didn't come out and say like he did the year prior, we want Aaron Rodgers back. We want him to be on the team. We're excited to have him. We want number 12 back in the building. Matt LaFleur came out in support of Aaron Rodgers and said those things. I'm not hearing that this year. It's a little quieter on that. Instead, Gutekunst is saying things like, well, we still need to have some conversations. And I thought in his press conference at the combine, he just really kind of danced around it and said all the right things without really saying anything. And so, right? I mean, he just was very, very delicate with his words and he chose them carefully. And I think he did that because I don't think he even knows because he admitted that he hadn't even talked to Rodgers yet. Rodgers comes out of the darkness retreat that he goes to, and he's been getting a lot of grief for that, which I understand. But it's his place where he's trying to think through what he wants to do. But at this point, if I'm the GM of the Packers, I'm like, man, are you in or are you out? What do you want to do? Let's go. And I would like my franchise quarterback to say, man, I'm all in and say that early. I mean, he's got to know by now what he wants to do. So the fact that it's quiet, he's not made any radio appearances, and he's not been on the Pat McAfee show talking about anything. He's been really silent on the issue. Packers are kind of dancing around it. I think really both sides are just trying to figure out what the other side wants. And I think that's probably what they're going to do eventually when they get together to talk. Someone had asked Brian Gutekunst, well, who initiates the phone call? He didn't answer that question either. He just kind of danced around that as well. So I think a lot of this is hinged on Aaron Rodgers kind of making the first move, and then the Packers. He's probably going to want to hear them say, do you want me back or do you want to trade me? What do you want to do? And I think that's what the conversation is going to revolve around. Now, I will say this. You asked about Jordan Love. I think if they really think Jordan Love is the guy and they really are sold on him, it's going to be really hard to keep Rodgers another year. If he's that next guy, like they did the same thing when Rodgers was ready to take the reins from Brett Favre. And Brett said, "Hey, I'm gonna leave the organization. I want to retire." And then he said, "Oh, I want to come back." And by that time, they committed to Rodgers. So that was a little bit of a different scenario than what we're seeing today, but it's still the same concept in that. Do the Packers really think Jordan Love is the next guy that's going to carry the franchise for the next 10 years? If the answer is yes to that, they don't want to walk away from that. And so I think that's why you're seeing this tiptoeing around the subject until really it doesn't matter what you say to the media, it's what you say to each other behind closed doors, and they'll have those conversations. But I'm not sure if Rodgers, if he does want to be traded, um, I don't think there's, I just read today where the Raiders said, we're not interested in giving up a lot of draft picks to get him. We're just not going to go there. Now that could be posturing just to act uninterested so you can drive the price down for a trade. But the Jets seem to be all in. They're ready to go. But then here's the key thing, Landry. Does Aaron Rodgers want to go play for the New York Jets? Does he really want to do that? He said he wanted to finish his career as a Packer, but he also understood the business. And if he had to go to New York or another team, he would understand the nature of the business for that. But does he really want to go to New York, or would he say to the Packer organization, no, don't trade me to New York? And if he did say that, then what do you do as the Packers? So it's really a tough spot right now. I don't know which way this is going to go. If you ask me personally as a fan, which way would I like it to go? This would be my answer. I would trade Aaron Rodgers, and I would go with Jordan Love if you think he's the guy. Because if you bring back Rodgers, here's what's going to happen. Are you going to be able to afford to bring other people around him? Probably not. He's getting $60 million. Are you going to be able to afford to keep Jordan Love? Probably not, because if you sign him to that 5th-year option, you got to pay him $20 million. So you're paying $80 million to your quarterbacks. And Love wants to play. And there's rumors that if Love doesn't start, he wants to be traded. So now you're talking about, do we trade Jordan Love instead? And again, if you're the Packer organization and you think Jordan Love is the guy, I don't see how you can trade him. Keep in mind, the Packers didn't make the playoffs last year. You got a 39-year-old quarterback. Yes, he's a four-time MVP. Yes, he's a Super Bowl winner. But do you bring him back and finish 9-8 and lose in the first round? Does the team get that much better to where he's going to put him over the edge next year? I just don't see it. I think the nice thing with Jordan Love is he's going to have a lower salary if you trade Rodgers, and then you can start building the team around Love. That's what they did in Seattle with Russell Wilson, right? Wilson was on a rookie contract. They could go out and afford all these other players, and they had some great teams. That's what NFL teams do. They have young quarterbacks come in that play really well. They have a lower salary. You can afford other players, and you can make that run with your team. Plus, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, they're both younger, and so they can kind of grow and mature with Love. So that would be a long answer to a complicated issue. Um, but that's my take on it. I think at the end of the day, um, it's really going to come down to what Gutekunst and Rodgers and the Pack organization want to do. But I'll tell you this much: if they really believe in Love, I think he's traded. If they don't believe in Love, they'll stick with Rodgers. So I think that's going to tell us a lot. If they're willing to trade Love, they may not be convinced he's the guy, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I certainly don't think they're looking to trade Love, and I don't see why they would want to at this point.
Right.
It's just, um, I mean, any quarterback in this year's draft is not going to be good as Love is right now, and so you can't just trade Love. And I don't know if they would look to draft another guy to go behind Rodgers if then this year or another year. And you can't really count on Rodgers for beyond a year because he contemplates retirement every year. So you definitely can't trade Love if if you ask me. And so
And that's a good
Rodgers,
point. Yeah, that's a good point. I just want to interject one quick thing. That's a good point about Rodgers. You said he's kind of a year-to-year quarterback. If he is traded, the team that trades for him is going to probably want a 2-year commitment from him, especially if they're going to give up like 2 number ones or one and a second. I think they're going to want a 2-year commitment, and will he give that to that team? They're not going to want to sign a 1-year deal. They'll want a 2-year deal.
yeah, what you were saying there about uh, not being able to build around Rodgers. That's absolutely true. If he really wanted to go win a Super Bowl, he would take less money, I would think. It doesn't seem like he's quite as all in as he was in previous years. He kind of doesn't really know and just takes a while making his decision. Um, and yeah, he did appear on a podcast yesterday, I believe, and he said all the answers are inside me, and I'm not sure what he's really trying to say by that. Like he's just trying to show the Packers that he can just pretty much can get his way, and I'm not. Yeah, he seems like if he had the answers, he'd tell the Packers. If he really wanted to stay in Green Bay, he'd care about the Packers a little bit more. It seems like he's thinking a little bit more of himself, and the Packers can't really do a whole lot. You can't really trade for DeAndre Hopkins when you got that salary there. You
Mm-hmm.
can't go out and get a good veteran guy to be with Rodgers, and that was part of the problem with Devontae Adams. I mean, I guess I realized they did in the end try to offer him lots of money
Mm-hmm.
to bring him back, but that's why they were having trouble getting a long-term deal done with him. So I don't know. He doesn't seem to be into football as much, so I don't know if he'll want to be traded either at this point if he's not really that all into going for the Super Bowl. But let's talk uh, trades a little bit. Kind of fun to talk about. Do you really think there's anyone other than the Jets that would be willing to uh, go for Rodgers, to actually pursue Rodgers in a trade?
Yeah, great question. And there's always in the NFL, right? There's always that it always seems like there's that team that just kind of sits behind the sidelines a little bit, behind the curtain, and they don't really say much, right? They just kind of just see how things shake out and trying to decide, what they're going to do. Um, and then they all of a sudden they're this late dark horse entry that comes in and says, "Hey, we're interested," and they swoop in. We've seen that happen. Having said that, um, you know, I think the team that stands out, obviously, because they've already vocally have said it, has been the New York Jets. They make the most sense. They've had a lot of good draft picks recently with a stable of draft picks, and they've landed on some really nice ones. They got good young receiving core. They have a really good defense. What are they missing? They're missing a quarterback. Can they afford to give up some draft picks? Yes, they can. Does New York want to win? Yes, they do. And they think Rodgers could be the guy. And actually, I think Rodgers can go into a situation like that and have success. His skill set's down a little bit, sure, but I think he still wants to play football. I think Rodgers still. There's 60 million reasons why he wants to still play. If he retires, he loses that. So I don't think he's going to retire. Um, I think it would be ironic that he would go to New York Jets, just kind of follow the same path as Favre. Um, Hopefully, he wouldn't go to the Vikings later, but if he did, we just have to beat him twice. But I would say that if there's any other team, that's a tough thing too, right? Going to the AFC, you're going to the AFC with Jared Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, wherever he ends up. That's another discussion, right? And then you have all these quarterbacks. But I think if there's one team that could maybe stand out, yeah, it could be the Tennessee Titans, right? That could be a team. Um, so that wouldn't surprise me. Maybe the Indianapolis Colts could be another team. Again, I think that if the Packers do make a trade, they're going to probably want to go trade into the AFC. That's typically what you see. I don't think you would see them trade within the NFC. But if, let's say, there was only one team in the NFC, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Let's say the 49ers said, hey, we would be interested in Rodgers. And that's the only suitor. Would Green Bay do it? That'd be tough, to see.
Hmm.
But I really think it'll be an AFC. I think there'll be enough. I think there's going to be some people. I think they want to first hear what he's going to say. Gutekunst said, "Well, I haven't taken any calls." Well, that's because Rodgers hasn't made a decision, so they're not going to. It's a worthless phone call. Hey, we're interested. Well, we don't know yet. That would be the phone call. So I do think that you just need two teams that are interested, right? And they both covet him greatly, and that'll drive the price up. And I think you would see that. But those would be my choices that I would see. Probably Tennessee, Indianapolis could be some dark horse teams that could come up there.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, I think there definitely could be some teams. I think I saw something just a little bit ago that the Panthers
Hmm.
inquired um,
Okay.
about a trade. So that'd be interesting, but that is in the NFC. Um, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he will retire, just mainly because of the money. Um, I mean, he can still play. Teams will still want him on their team. So as long as
Hmm.
they do, and as long as they're paying him, I think he may as well just play and make some money. I think maybe that's kind of his thought process. But yeah, the Packers do seem quite a bit more willing to move on from Rodgers. I mean, Matt LaFleur seems to be kind of, he's always been kind of loyal to his guys. It seems like the coaching staff and Rodgers in the past. I don't know. He has said that he thinks Love can play, and I don't remember hearing a whole lot um, this year from him or Brian Gutekunst that they're um, they're all in on Rodgers. They want Rodgers back again. Um, Gutekunst said at the combine that all options are on the table at this point until we have those conversations with Rodgers. And so, do you think the Packers could possibly trade Rodgers even if he wants to come back to the Packers? Is there a way where they want Love bad enough that they would trade Rodgers against his will, or would they even be able to do that?
Yeah, and I think those would be conversations that we probably wouldn't be privy to. I think those are the conversations I think Gutekunst is talking about that have to happen. When he says those things, I think, and he said all options are on the table. I think they're really intrigued with the idea of going with Love, and they just don't know how to say it. How's it going to look in the public eye? How is it going to go across the fan base? Which, by the way, I think the fan base is ready to move on. By and large, I would think the majority would say would support the move. So I think the
Mm-hmm.
Packers organization knows that, and I think maybe last year it was 50-50. I think this year it's probably more, yeah, let's move on. The people I've talked to, that's what they say. And I think everybody's excited to get to a different era. You got to keep in mind, you're going to get maybe 1 year, 2 years out of Rodgers. When does his skills start to diminish? I think we already saw that it diminished some, not as mobile. Of course, he had the thumb injury, but he still wasn't as mobile, wasn't as accurate. Still good, still good. Still want him on my team. I still like the guy, but maybe you can see little cracks in the surface starting to appear. Now, maybe so I think that's what the Packers are seeing. Now they're thinking, is Jordan Love this next, is he our guy? And when you hear them talk about Jordan Love, they kind of gush about it. They say he's really matured in the last 3 years. He's got command of the offense. He came in that Philadelphia game, limited time, but he looked good. And so I think the Packers are excited to see what they have in him. And you really don't know what you have in a guy until you throw him out there and let him play.
Exactly.
And that's what and I think the Packers are dying to see that. And if you tell them, and if you put this into your head and say, okay, if we keep Rodgers and trade Love, and then we watch him for the next 10 years be this phenomenal quarterback, I don't know as an organization if you recover from that. And I don't know if you can live with that. And that would be probably one of the biggest mistakes. All that could be laid at the GM's feet. If I'm a GM, I don't want to take that chance. I'd say, Rodgers, thank you. You're a lifetime Packer. You're going to be in our Ring of Honor. We appreciate it, but hey, we got this. Jordan's ready. You know what it's like. You were ready when Favre was here. This is the tough part of the business. Um, Not personal, but as an organization, we can't just look at next year. We have to look at 10 years, 12 years from now. And we want to have that our next franchise quarterback. We think we got him. If we don't play him, we're going to lose him. It's just I think that's the real conversation that they're going to have with the guy. And I think Rodgers is going to understand that because he's been there. It's just the sad thing is he's on the other side of that now, like Favre was. Now he's on that side. And I think he's smart enough to know that that's part of the business. Um, and so, yeah, you can't take it personally, but I think it hurts. But these are the tough decisions. This is where the GM makes their money. These are the tough calls you got to make as an organization. And are the Packers willing to do that? I think they are. And I just think that's why you're seeing publicly, the positioning. But they'll talk about that behind closed doors. And then I think they'll come out unified when the decision is made. And Rodgers will speak highly of the Packers. The Packers will speak highly of Rodgers, and it'll be professional. And I don't think you'll see the messiness that you saw with the Favre issue. I think they'll keep that pretty clean. And I think as long as both sides are honest with each other, um, I think it's going to work out.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Uh, yeah, things certainly could turn sour with that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but um, yeah, I think Rogers is. I think he knows about the business side of things. He's talked about it before, and
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think um, he would be willing to accept whatever. Uh, I thought it was interesting what Gutekunst said about Love's future in Green Bay. He said, "I'm excited to see Jordan grow and play, and I certainly expect that to be here." Do you think that could be a little bit him hinting at them just rolling with Love from now on? Or just what are your thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, you have to take it for what it's worth. He said, I can see him playing here, right? That was his quote. So I think sometimes publicly you kind of lay the foundation before you meet privately, so that you're kind of prepping someone mentally, for the direction that you think you're going as a team. The other side of it. So I do think that yes, to answer your question, I think that the Packers do want to go with Love, and they're trying to communicate that in a professional public way. But I think, with Rodgers, I think what if I had it, if I'm not the GM, obviously, but if I were the GM, this is what I'd be thinking. You're taking time to make a decision. I get that. That's fine. You go to this darkness retreat. You come out. There's been no communication with the Packers directly as far as what's going to happen, and so um, there's at some point you have to know what you're gonna do, and you've alluded to that earlier when he said I know inside what I want to do. He has to know. Let's start that communication because it's really holding up the Packers and future decisions what they want to do in that. And I think they just need to get together and they need to make this decision.
Hmm.
And Brady made a decision right away. He said he retired and he was done. He just boom, that was it. He made his decision. Um, and I think the Packers just want that. Just tell us what you want to do. And I think that's what fans want. Why are we waiting? And so he has to know. And I think people are just anxious to get there. But the longer it takes, I think the more fans are getting more distant from it and just ready to move on. I think that's what you're seeing. It's like if
Hmm.
you were married and you were separated, um, and you told your wife, "Well, I'm going to go to a darkness retreat for 3 days and decide if I want to still be married to you or if I want to go to another person." Right? That's almost kind of it's a weird analogy, but if you get what I'm saying, and then you go away, and then you come back and say, "Well, inside, I think I know what I want to do, but I'm just not sure yet," and just you know, the spouse is going to say, "Okay." That doesn't make any sense. If you can't even be committed to me, then this is really strange that the way you're talking to me about this right now. So, and I think that's kind of has the same feel to it. It's like if you're committed to somebody, you're with them through better for worse, no matter what it is. I'm with this team. And it just feels like both sides are like they know that this separation's coming and they're trying to handle it the best way they can. So to me, get in a room, figure it out, and let's just move on instead of dragging it out and dragging it out. And that's what it feels like.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, well, we're running out of time here. But that was definitely some good thoughts there. So one final question. Just what do you think will happen? What's your prediction uh, for all of this?
Well, my prediction is that the Packers will stay with Jordan Love, and I think they're ready to move on to that beginning. I do think Rodgers is traded, um, and I do think that will happen soon. I think by the 15th of March, I think I saw a deadline for something, for the
Yes.
Packers to kind of reach to want a decision by then. I think so. I think you'll see one forthcoming. Some of this delay too could be just things working on privately behind the scenes with teams, that everybody's keeping tight-lipped about, if a trade is even an option. That stuff could be going on. But I don't think that is. I think it's being truthful. The Packers do need to get together with Rodgers and have that conversation, but I think they both know what it's going to be about. And so that's my prediction. So we'll see if it comes out that way.
All right. Well, It was great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us and giving your thoughts on the situation. It's good to be able to talk with someone more experienced and who's been around the Packers for a long time. That was great. That was a lot of fun, and maybe we'll do it again some other time.
Awesome. I had a blast, Landry. Thanks for having me on, and thoroughly enjoyed my time with you. You great hosting the show tonight, and had a lot of fun with you as well. And hopefully we can get together again soon.
Yeah, that would be great.
All
Uh,
right.
well, see ya.
Take care.